New intros. That would be embarrassing, wouldn't it?
That kind of thing. I'm getting the recording here. Oh, yes, I see.
It's recording. It started. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. Excuse the technical difficulties. This is our first Zoom launch, but we're delighted to invite you to the launch of The Seven Doors by Agnes Ravatn and translated by Rosie Hedger, who you will see on your screen here. And looking after the proceedings tonight is the one and only Michael J. Malone. I am Karen Sullivan, and I am publisher of Orenda Books. Normally, we would be launching this book at the Norwegian Embassy or at the Edinburgh Book Festival or at Bloody Scotland, but this year we are forced to move online, but we're going to have fun nonetheless. Okay, so first of all, I am thrilled to introduce you to the incredible Agnes Ravatn. She's the queen of Nordic suspense, amongst other things. She's an extraordinary writer. Her prose is beautiful. There's multiple layers and themes, which Rosie has very beautifully recreated in the English version for us. But there's also a really sublime page-turning tension. So Agnes is joining us from the Norwegian countryside, and we are, of course, delighted to welcome her translator, Rosie, who is from Scotland, but is calling in from York. And leading the proceedings is Michael J. Malone. And we're also going to pay a little bit of tribute to this beautiful book, which is A Song of Isolation. So this was published alongside The Seven Doors last week. And interestingly, when I was looking back, I see that the first Orenda publication for Michael Malone, which was his Orenda debut, A Suitable Lie, was published alongside The Bird Tribunal, which was Agnes's first book for us and her first ever book published in English. So I think it's very fitting that we're publishing these two books together this month, and we're all together to celebrate. So Michael's on his fifth psychological thriller for Orenda, all of which have been ebook number ones. He is coming to us from Ayr in Scotland. He's not just an immense writer, he is also a published poet with over 200 poems published in literary magazines in the UK. His debut novel, Blood Tears, won the Pitlochry Prize, which is from the Scottish Association of Writers, and he really hasn't looked back. He's far too humble to tell you about his beautiful thriller, psychological thriller, A Song of Innocence, so I'll do this before we start to talk about The Seven Doors. So this is a moving and a very topical dark thriller. It's written with Michael's trademark poetic language and his sensitive exploration of a very topical issue. So film star Emily leaves the limelight for Dave. He's a Scottish ordinary guy with an ordinary job, and everything's looking rosy, sorry Rosie, and perfect until the child of a neighbor accuses him of abuse, sexual abuse, and their lives are turned upside down. This is a real did he, didn't he book from the beginning, but it's a study of desperation and loneliness, of greed, a yearning for celebrity, and it really changes our perception, our understanding of the term victim. It's dark, it's not in any way offensive, so don't be worried about that, even though it deals with a sensitive subject. It's stunning, and I really recommend that you read this. So signed copies of both of these books are available from our partner Dulwich Books, and they have a special offer going on. You can contact them on their website, which is www.dulwichbooks.co.uk, or email them at hello@dulwichbooks.co.uk. And it's really nice, particularly in the current situation, for us to support independence. They're obviously not getting the footfall that they once did, and we don't know what's around the corner. So it would be great. They do have a special offer going on. I would also really like to thank Norla for their incredible support. Their translation grant for Agnes's beautiful book made it possible for us to publish this in English, and we're really, really grateful. We're also grateful to Norla for finding Rosie for us all those years ago. We'd also like to thank the Norwegian Embassy and Norwegian Arts for your help and your ongoing support and constant encouragement. It's an honor to publish these amazing Norwegian writers, and if you haven't tried one, everybody, this is the place to start. So I'm going to hand things over to Michael. If you have a question at any point, there's a little Q&A button which you can push and put your question in there. We'll be dealing with that a little bit later. Or you can, if you can't see that, you can use the chat facility. But for now, congratulations, Agnes and Rosie, on publication of The Seven Doors, and to Michael for A Song of Isolation. And here we go.
Thank you, Karen. And hello, Rosie and Agnes. Nice to see you both. So what I thought I'll do is I'll introduce you both, tell everyone about you, and then go to Agnes and we can start talking about the book. We'll have a short, very short reading, I believe, and Agnes will read in Norwegian and Rosie will read that in English. So, first of all, Agnes originally apparently set out to study music, but a creative writing course set her on a very different career path. Her second novel, The Bird Tribunal, was her first to be published in the UK. And according to your Wikipedia page, Agnes, it's been translated into 11 languages. It won the English Pen Translation Award, was Book at Bedtime on Radio 4, and was the very first translated novel to be chosen by W.H. Smith for the Fresh Talent Programme. And if that wasn't enough, it was also nominated for the International Dublin Literary Award. So fantastic, well done. And we're delighted that Agnes is back with her brand new novel, The Seven Doors, more of which soon. But first, let me introduce her translator, Rosie. Rosie had the good sense to be born in Scotland and completed her MA in Scandinavian Studies at the University of Edinburgh. She's lived and worked in Norway, Sweden and Denmark, and as Karen says now, is now in New York. She was a candidate in the British Centre for Literary Translations mentoring scheme for Norwegian, mentored by the one and only Don Bartlett. So that must have been quite an experience for you. Mm-hmm. So Agnes, how about we start off by you telling us about your book?
I can certainly try. It is a crime novel, but it's not your typical bloody and fast-paced crime novel. I believe it's more of slow-burning psychological thriller, perhaps, about Nina, who is a about 60-year-old professor of literature in Bergen in Norway. And when we meet her in the book, she is in different kinds of trouble. Her house is being demolished by bulldozers because of a new tram. I don't know what it, and she has trouble communicating with her daughter, and she is more or less disillusioned in her work or her profession. She teaches literature for more or less uninterested students, and starting to asking herself what is the point of it all. And when we first meet her, when things start to happen in the book, is when her tenant goes missing right after Nina has had an unpleasant encounter with her, and she starts to dig into the missing tenant, who is a single mother, and starting to find more and more information about her. whereas the police investigation doesn't really what's the word? It's more or less resultless. So she becomes sort of a private investigator, and I'm not sure how good she is at it, but she certainly finds out things.
Good. So how about you give the readers a nice wee surprise. So you're going to read a very short section in Norwegian, and Rosie will then give us the translation. So.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
Wrong book. Here we are. It's Norwegian.
Show us the jacket, Agnes.
Sorry?
Show us the Norwegian jacket.
Oh, yeah. Here it is.
Oh, ours is way better.
I know. Hun blir vekt av Mats. Han sitter ved fotenden i dress, klar til å gå med mobilen henne i handa. Gratulerer med dagen, sier han med et smil. Hun skjønner er halvt trøstende og halvt skadefro. Hun rekker henne telefonen. Hun setter seg opp og griper brillene fra nattbordet. Nest øverst på nettutgaver til Bergens Tidende lyser overskrifter mot henne. Professor etterlyser litteraturvitere i politiet. Nei, uler hun og drar dyna over hovedet. Han løfter vekk dyna, og Nina gjemmer ansiktet i hendene. Jeg synes ikke ideen din er så dum, jeg, heller han fram, og hun ser mørkt på han. Men så har jeg heller aldri forstått meg på det yrket ditt, heller han fram. Han legger mobilen på dyna framfor henne og kysser henne på kinnet, før han reiser seg og går.
Thank you.
Right.
Good, huh?
I love your accent when you read. Okay, same in English. She's woken by Mads. He sits at the foot of the bed in his suit, ready to leave, her mobile in his hands. Congratulations, he says, with a smile imbued with both solace and schadenfreude, passing her the phone. She sits up and grabs her spectacles from the bedside table. Second from the top on the Bergens Tidende, the newspaper website, is the headline, Professor calls for literary scholars to join the police force. No, she wails, pulling the duvet up over her head. He pulls it back and Nina buries her face in her hands. I don't think it's such a bad idea, actually, he says, and she glowers at him. But then I've never really understood your job. He places her phone down in front of her on the duvet and kisses her cheek before getting up and leaving.
Thank you. So Agnes, I read somewhere that you write in New Norwegian. Could you explain what that actually is?
I'll try. It's a variety of Norwegian, as you probably all know. Norway was under Danish rule for centuries, and so the language in Norway was the language used by and spoken by the people who ruled us was Danish. And in the middle of the 19th century, one man traveled around all of Norway and collected dialects or dialect varieties from all over Norway to construct a more democratic way, version of Norwegian, based on how people really spoke. So this was, his work was complete in about 1860, and today it's one of the two official languages in Norway, or two varieties of Norwegian, and we're only about 15% in Norway who actively uses it, but a lot of the best literature in Norway are written in New Norwegian. Not only in my opinion, but scientifically proven.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. And there's kind of a similar situation echoing here in Scotland, but we won't get into that just now. But Rosie, does that present any challenges for you as a translator?
I think initially it did. When I first started translating Agnes's work, it was one of the first times I really had to focus on using or on working with New Norwegian. So it's a very much more poetic language. Because it is this artificial written construction, nobody speaks New Norwegian as it is written, because it is this collection of all these different dialects. So in that regard, it was quite difficult. You can speak with people and you can understand different accents, different dialects, but seeing it written down, it looks very different from bokmål, which is the other variety, the more common variety, and the one that I was taught at university. So it was a big challenge at first, but I'm becoming more accustomed to it now that I've been working with it more. Occasionally there's something I just haven't got a clue, but as a translator, it's nice then because you can contact the author, you know, I can get in touch with Agnes and I can ask what something is about. And actually it's nice because with New Norwegian, it is linked to these regions, so something will be quite region specific, an expression or something like this. So actually it's a nice opportunity to learn as much as anything. So it is different, but I would say yes, more poetic certainly. And what Agnes says is true, that a lot of the best Norwegian literature is written in New Norwegian. Yeah. Right.
Wow, cool. So I hear regularly from other Scottish authors of times when words that we use that are nuanced on a local basis that resist accurate translation, and it sometimes leads to quite humorous kind of outcomes. Can you think of anything where the words that Agnes has used are perhaps not working in English the right way?
Gosh.
Understand?
I find it hard to think of a word, but one thing that always strikes me is that often there won't be a sentence will simply begin with thinks, blah, blah, blah. So pronouns are not always as important, but in English, that just doesn't always work. So that kind of is something we need to add in quite often.
Okay.
I'll try and think of a good example off the top of my head, but I can't think of anything just now.
Okay, we'll come back, and if you think of something, let us know. Agnes, so let's get back to the book. So we're very quickly introduced to this, what I felt was a real winning idea. I just love this notion of a literary scholar being ideally equipped to run a criminal investigation. So could you explain where that notion came from?
I guess it came from me watching a lot of true crime on on telly and always thinking, if I was in charge of that investigation, this would never have happened. In the cases where the police catch the wrong guy and so on, and this notion that people would people who are well read and who have a deep interest in literature, what they gain from that, amongst other things, is really deep insight in other human beings, and even more training in pretending, living inside other people's heads or minds, which would be quite useful if you're trying to understand a criminal or a criminal act. considering motive and so on. So that was the that was the initial thought, I guess, and from that I came up with this idea that a professor of literature investigated a real crime using her skills as a trained reader. But as I guess the book shows, it's not entirely obvious that she is correct.
Mm-hmm. She's actually, at the bit that you read actually shows that she's mocked initially for kind of daring to say this, and she actually says it first time at an actual public event, and which is quite brave. But it felt like she was driven to do that because she was just frustrated with, as you said earlier on, this lack of engagement from her students. So I guess, and it also begs the question, if you, as someone who watches true crime, would you make a good detective?
Me? I wouldn't, no. Definitely not. I am really I can't I have a really messy head, and I'm way too impatient. I hate to search for things, and I keep losing things all the time, and I can't find them. So it's obvious that I wouldn't be a very or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would be this brilliant detective who had the right intuition, 1 out of 100 crimes.
Right.
But I would like to be Poirot.
Poirot, right? Yeah. So
he was my childhood's hero.
Oh, really? Right. So what drew you to Hercule Poirot?
What drew me to him?
Yeah.
What I liked about him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the classic intellect, and the peculiar behavior matched with the intellect, the eccentric detective and mastermind.
Yeah. And do you watch a lot of true crime?
I don't like on a regular basis, only if it's something that really interests me. But I do like to follow real crime journalism and so forth, and one of my main interests and main sources of procrastination is following ongoing trials in the Norwegian courthouses. Yes.
Right. Okay. Mine's is watching Homes Under the Hammer, but that's something completely different. So, talking about what is it you think that draws you to procrastinate with that kind of thing? What's the attraction?
Well, I don't really have any particular interest in like serial killers or crazy stuff. Yeah. But I really I'm fascinated by normal people to happen to end up as criminals, which I find much more scary than the odd serial killer, because it tells us that the situation is more important than the personality in speaking of when we talk about who is able to do certain stuff and becoming criminal. So I think most of us is capable of doing almost anything if the right circumstances is there. And
I read in an interview that you thought that as far as society was concerned, that it's not the apple that's bad, that it's the barrel. So perhaps that leads into what you're saying. So what was your thinking behind that statement?
Excuse me, can you repeat that, please?
You said about society that it's not the apple that's bad, but it's the barrel. So what was your thinking behind that?
Yeah, I think it refers to something that Philip Zimbardo said. He's the famous social psychologist who conducted the transferred prison experiment, for those of you who recall it. And I think he referred to Abu Ghraib, the Iraqi prison, where normal people became torturists. And that's an extreme situation, of course, but in everyday life as well, if we are under the right amount of pressure, I think anybody could snap. I think that's far more interesting also in crime writing than crazy serial killers. In this book too, where we follow relatively normal people who end up doing pretty awful things.
There's a theme in the book, or I guess a comparative look at the relationships between fathers and daughters versus mothers and daughters. So why did you want to investigate that in the book?
Well, I think deep down yes, it's true that I write about so it's the Oedipus complex. Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
That's well known. But the other famous psychologist, Carl Gustav Jung, he introduced his own variety, which he called the Elektra Complex, which was about, oh my gosh, mothers and daughters, not mothers, fathers and daughters, not mothers and sons. It's a long time since I wrote the book. I can't really recall what it's about, but but I think he was onto something, even though Freud and the other psychoanalysts didn't pay much attention to that complex. It's really interesting to me. I think it's something there that has gotten lost in all the Oedipus complex talk.
Yeah, there's a different kind of energy in those two different relationships, isn't there? Yeah, because it's kind of the cliche would be that the daughter can wrap the father around their finger and get them to do anything, whereas the mother will be much more savvy and understand what the daughter's up to. But there's also the other psychological or psychology sort of theme in the book was the whole thing about transference, and again is back to Freud. So are you able to explain what transference is? And can you talk a little bit about how it affects the characters and the story?
Sure, yeah. So Transference and Transference Love is a it was introduced by Freud after he discovered that a lot of his colleagues' patients, who were always young women in their late teens or early 20s, he noticed that they almost without exception fell in love with their therapist, even though the therapist was a 70-year-old guy with well, not too appealing apparently, but so he found found it very interesting, this dynamic, and the whole the school of analysis was always also very much in danger because of therapists engaging in sexual relationships with their patients. So it was in the early days of psychoanalysis, it was a real mess, ethically and so on. But he found it really interesting. Why does these emotions appear and this dynamics appear? And after studying for a couple of years, he ended up calling it Transference Love. And it's his theory. We think a little bit differently about it today, but his initial theory was that we, when we are patients or pupils or students and other almost childlike roles, we copy the love we had for our parents as children, and transfer it over to our doctor, therapist, coach, teacher, professor, and so on, the authority figures in our lives. And this is the thing is that it's not love, but it's very, very love-like. And so the person who develops these feelings is trying his or her best to initiate a love relationship, and very often the person in charge in the upper hope you understand what I mean.
Yeah, the person that got the control and the power there.
Right, the person with the power, yeah. Yes. Very often use the situation or abuse the situation, with or without acknowledging that the feelings, that the whole relationship dynamics and the situation, they're not real and not very often not even allowed. And so this is it's an important theme in my book. I had always known about transference love when Freud writes about it, but I wasn't aware that you also find it not only inside the therapy room, but in all kinds of relationships, in all kinds of places in society, and I don't think everybody else knows it as well. So I think it's good to know that what often feels like love and infatuation is something else, fueled by the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you use it beautifully within the book. You were able to sort of indulge your love of music in the book, so you bring to us Bartók's Bluebeard's Castle. Now this was a new one to me, so I'll need to go and investigate it actually. But when you sort of read the story of this opera, it's very bloodthirsty, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So why did you choose it?
It's in the book. It is a metaphor for what's going on in Nina's life, but it's extremely messy, and it's actually based on a fairy tale from this 16th, 17th century, I think, with dead wives hanging from hooks on the wall. And I was just recently told or aware that fairy tales, we normally read them to our young children when they are 2 and 3 and 4, before Disney takes them. But the Bluebird tale it's quite extreme to think that this is something they told children back in the in the dark ages, but actually fairy tales back then was very often told to teens and young women, to like teach them how to behave and not behave.
Right, so to scare them into behaving. So you use folklore in the children's stories as well. You have Nina reading to grandchild, and it strikes me, as far as that child was concerned, the gorier the better.
Exactly. Well, that's my personal experience. At least with my children.
So we have some questions coming up here now. So let's dive into them from the audience. So Hugo is asking, are you going to? What he says was that he enjoys how you manage to combine top crime plots and high literary quality, all by using quiet and low-key literary tools. I know you also write other things, but are you going to write more stories having a crime in the center of them?
That's a good question.
The correct answer is yes.
Thank you. Next, please. Well, the actual answer, Karen, is that I really never thought about myself as a crime writer, and don't really read much crime either. And currently I'm writing a new novel, which is not a crime. And writing that book, I'm constantly thinking, isn't there a murder missing here? So maybe I am a crime writer, but I'm really happy about the things that Hugo says there, because that's exactly what I think myself. I think there's a space between the bloody crime thriller and the the boring normal novels, where you can keep the literary quality, but still have real suspense. And I don't find, at least in Norway, that many writers write suspenseful novels with a high quality, literally high quality, and so I think that's a place where I might as well put my books.
Excellent, excellent. So next question is from Katie and Ella. Hi, I loved your book. Nina brings Agnes brings quite a lot of psychoanalysis. I'm the one that speaks English here. Expertise to Nina's investigation. How much of that psychoanalysis came from your personal interests and your reading, and how much new research did you have to do to help that evolve into the plot?
Well, I love reading Freud. I think he's brilliant, both as a writer, but also his ideas were groundbreaking and in many cases very to the point. And I experienced Transference Love myself, which I find quite amusing, because I was starting to, it's a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer and was in treatment for months in a hospital, and I being hetero and married and everything, I fell in love with my 50-year-old female physical therapist, my oncologist, which was great, because I thought cancer treatment was fantastic because of my encounters with her. But I experienced that. I was really interested in the transference theory, and immediately decided that this is what I'm going to write about. But initially I started writing like a comic, or it's a humoristic novel about this stupid patient based on myself, but couldn't really make it work. And after a year of thinking, I think, finally came up with Nina's story.
Excellent, thank you. Now, a question from David Warner, who himself is a very fine translator. And he's asking, Agnes, now that your novels have been translated into English, has it influenced the way you write? For example, are you more mindful to now be writing for a wider and not only Norwegian audience?
Whiter or?
No, more people, sorry.
Not really. No, not really. But I do think I try to make the names of the characters not too not containing lots of Norwegian letters that right. Doesn't really exist in English. But no, I don't really. I know Rosie is going to make it much far way better in English than I can write in Norwegian anyway, so I'm really relaxed.
Right.
Rosie, everybody says that.
Very kind, thank you.
You should stop ghostwriting and write your own books.
I don't have the ideas, I don't have the great ideas, the great criminal thoughts in my mind that you do.
So Steve Wright is asking Agnes, the Bird Tribunal was very atmospheric and the relationship between the main protagonists was tangible to him as a reader. Is the dynamic between people something you feel is a key part of your writing?
Yes, I do. I think that's probably a driving force. It's really what interests me the most, I think, in life and as a writer, the difficulties and the we have with each other, and at the same time how extremely enjoyable it is to interact with each other. And it's a never-ending topic to me. Yeah.
Cool. New question from David Harris. I was taken by how the book seemed to circle around property and ownership, all the different houses and the stress over finding the right place in the right part of the city. Was that intentional?
Certainly, yes. It's well, Nina is she's an intellectual and thinks of herself as an intellectual, but at the same time it's not clear whether she is aware of it or not, but she has become more and more of a materialist, and that has a deep importance. It's not a big it's just a character trait in the beginning, like, but in the end it becomes a very important and dangerous character trait, I think.
Right. So did you travel about to research the different spots, or did you know them, the geographical areas already?
Well, I lived in Bergen for, I think, 4 years when I was a student. So I know the university quite well, and also Bergen was the city where I was hospitalized 2 years ago. So I think I was reintroduced to Bergen. It was and I was walking around all the time during the treatment and discovering new small narrow streets, and Bergen is really a fantastic, lovely city which everybody should visit after the pandemic. So it's a treat to write about Bergen in a novel.
Good, excellent, thank you. So Sonia is saying it was wonderful seeing an older female character as the main protagonist. Was this an intentional decision, or just the way that Nina presented herself to you as the story progressed?
Both. I think she came to mind very suddenly to me, and I started writing the book as soon as she introduced herself to me. But I also I was happy that she was an older woman, because I am very well aware that that's a quite absent character in most fiction. So I am, of course, aware of when I write. I don't let I don't try to write about what's missing, but like in particular. But I find that I often end up writing about things that are missing anyway. So that's a good thing.
Okay, thank you. A question from Mary AP. And I might not pronounce this properly, but Ingeborg, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Ingeborg.
Close but no cigar.
Ingeborg is such a princess, entitled, arrogant, abrasive. Is she modelled on anyone you know?
Was that like a hint to that was my autobiographic character in the? No, I guess Ingeborg is someone we all know, more or less. I absolutely agree. She's disgusting, and she has this. It's the entitlement that follows being born into a academically, culturally, and economically aristocracy. Aristocracy. Which I see a lot of. They are born with this entitlement and arrogance, and at the same time, Ingeborg do surprise during the novel, which I also think people who are so she shows more moral sense than both her parents, I think, throughout the story, which is was to me quite surprising.
Yeah. Eve Smith saying, "Hi Agnes, I loved your book. The descriptions of the landscape were really evocative. How important is a sense of place in your writing?"
Yeah, it's important, but I find it hard to write about the place where I am at the moment when I write. So when I wrote the Bird Tribunal, for instance, I had lived in Oslo, the capital of Norway, for almost 10 years. And the Bird Tribunal is set in a really, really, really remote place. And when I wrote the Seven Doors, as I said, I had recently been in Bergen for a couple of months previously, but I wrote it in the place where I live now, which is a really, really small village on the western coast of Norway. And when I try to write new novels now, I always try to write about a small village, because that would make research much easier. But I find it really, really hard to write about the place where I am, probably because I'm afraid that people will think that I'm writing about them. I don't know, but so it's when I'm in the city, I write about small villages, and the opposites around.
Right, okay. And Eve was asking for Rosie, how easy is it to translate those descriptions, and does it depend on you being familiar with the landscape as well?
It can be hard. I think that this book was slightly easier because I'm more familiar with urban environments in Norway. But if I'm uncertain, I just use Google Maps. I find that really useful if I'm trying to work out what's going on. If something isn't quite clear to me, just check it out on Google Maps. You can even do an entire route. Sometimes a route is described in the book, like I think a couple of times people are walking. If you want to see the type of building, it's really handy. You just put in the address. So yeah, it's definitely much easier than it used to be. I think without the internet, it would have been a nightmare. It would have been like pulling out maps or something. But yeah, certainly a familiarity with the natural landscape helps when you're translating the natural landscape. But this book with the urban environment, Google Maps was my friend.
Good tip for all the writers out there. And I see Karen Sullivan's face arriving.
Yes,
So that's
I'm your 3-minute warning or 2-minute warning.
So, do we have time for any more questions, or is that as done, Karen?
I wanted to ask, Agnes, considering your interest in Hercule Poirot, you must have been thrilled with that Times review calling you your work like Agatha Christie at her best.
Yeah, that's ace. It was brilliant.
I thought that. That's amazing. So are we gonna, I think there's actually a nice little personal question down here. Do we want to ask that one? How Agnes juggles her work and writing her novels and your babies?
Oh, the babies. They're 3 and 5 now, so they're fine.
Or you just let them go off and play with the sheep?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, juggling so I live on a small, I don't know if I even can call it a farm. It's a homestead. Is that the word? Yeah. So we have like,
we would say in Scotland.
Right, yeah. So we have about 30 sheep and 2 cats and 2 kids. So I find it actually it's a perfect it's perfect to combine farm work with writing. It's both to be able to combine the physical work with intellectual work. It's a good match, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we're going to be near the end of our time. I would like to thank Michael for leading the proceedings so beautifully, and to Rosie and Agnes for coming to discuss this amazing book. Here it is. Shall I tell them the funny story?
Yeah.
When you hold this up on Zoom, it looks like it's backwards. So I came up with this really super good idea that I would bring a mirror and do this so that you could see the book right way around. Only I'm not doing it right, am I? Anyway, it worked beautifully. Only then I found out that you can see it right way around. So that's my great story for the anyway. Thank you all for coming. These books, as I said, are signed and available from Dulwich Books for a special offer if you want to get your copies at a nice local independent, supportive local independent. But it's been great. It's been great seeing some authors in front of us. These are difficult times, and this is the kind of thing that makes it all worthwhile. So thank you for coming, and thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Agnes, and Sophie, who you can't see there, who is recording this. And actually, you could pass it on if somebody didn't get a chance to see this tonight. This recording will appear probably on our website and definitely on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to hear Agnes reading a nice bit of The Seven Doors, you can tune in to episode 50, I believe, of our Orenda Books at Bedtime, which is also on our YouTube channel. And Michael is reading from A Song of Isolation in episode 51. But for now, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Agnes.
I don't know how to stop this.